Sutton, Lisa Collin, Tony Gallo, the AMC conducted virtual workshops about research and scientific writing for over 120 biotechnology students at McLean Tech High School. We're really glad to see the hard work that the students have gone through come to fruition. The students will present their research material on topics ranging from the impact of COVID lockdowns to the best aquaponics systems for domesticated fish. Two very interesting ranges of conversation. So these presentations will be very engaging, and you might learn a couple things too, as I have already going through the PowerPoint slides myself. Just before I kick it off to the McLean Tech educators, I just want to say one thing, one little housekeeping item. So right after the educators, the McLean Tech educators introduce themselves, our presenters would go ahead and present their presentations. And then right after that, we're going to go through a Q&A. So for all Q&A, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom interface, and then just type in your question there, and then I will just go ahead and ask those questions that you've submitted in the Q&A box. But with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to our McLean Tech educators, and thank you again for attending this, what should be a really great engaging presentation.
Good morning, AAMC, and thank you very much for having us this morning. My name is Sherry Richardson, and I serve as Director of the Distinguished Academy of Biotechnology. Our partnership with AAMC has been incredible and definitely insightful for many of our scholars. This year has proven to be a very fruitful exchange of information between your organization and our students, and I have no doubt that you'll see that here today. And without our amazing Academy staff, a lot of this would not be possible. So I'd like to pass it over to our senior biotech teacher, Dr. Schuster.
All right, thank you, Ms. Richardson. So my name is Dr. Andrew Schuster. Like Ms. Richardson just said, I am the, excuse me, I am the senior project teacher for our Biotechnology Academy. So this year is a little different than previous years because, as I'm sure all of you are aware, we've been working from home. So to adapt with that, we've been doing a lot more projects that are home friendly. So some projects have been with aquaponics systems, which we have a bunch of equipment for that can be done safely at home. Some students have focused more on the public health aspects of the pandemic. For example, Iris's project looks at stress levels amongst adolescents. And then we have some really innovative projects, for example, Brandt's, where we're actually testing mask efficacy using a laser box that we constructed at the school. So lots of new challenges because of COVID, but I think that also a lot of new skills that we've been working on. And a big part of that has been AAMC's partnership with us, where we have our writing workshops we did, which have been very effective. And I know I've told Ms. Richardson before, like we need to get them again next year because that was really good, really helpful information. So I selected 3 of our students to come present to you guys today. So they're going to be talking about their projects. Nafisa and Iris have completed their data analysis for the most part. And then Brandt, him and I are going to be doing our follow-up experiments tomorrow at McKinley Tech, where we're going to be using a updated version of our laser box array. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to our first scholar.
Thank you, Dr. Schuster. My name is Iris Reyes. I'm a student at McKinley Technology High School. I am planning to attend George Washington University to get an undergraduate degree in public health and a master's in nursing. Today, I will be presenting to you all students stressed and surviving COVID-19. So my research question was, what is the impact of stress? I know since the pandemic has taken a toll on all of our lives, I wanted to know, how did stress affect our bodies? So I did a little bit of research here and there, and I found that health has a lot of adverse health effects on the body, such as high blood pressure, also there's hypertension, heart issues, potentially heart disease, and high irritability. I just looked in there, also had bowel issues, which isn't very fun. So it's safe to assume that stress has a very negative effect on the body. So I decided to dive a little deeper, and I wanted to figure out what are the sources of stress for students. In my survey, I measured around 3 parameters. The first thing I wanted to look at was how school was affecting students. I know for some students, it's very hard to do online school virtually, do it in person, hybrid, and it can cause a lot of stress having to deal with a lot of new assignments and a new environment. It's overall not a great time. Another thing I want to look at was home life for students, because I know some students may have family members affected by COVID-19. They may have to take care of family. And another aspect I looked into was potentially jobs that students might have that coincide with their school and their house, and just overall very convoluted schedule for them. So of course, I wanted to know, how did stress impact student health? As a student myself, I should know that stress is not a great thing to deal with. Students under stressful situations may not be able to perform well academically, may result in a drop in grades. Students may not be themselves under stress. They may be more likely to be a lot less social, more irritable. And with enough stress, like students may be able to develop conditions related to anxiety, depression, and stress, which is, again, not fun. So why is this important? I wanted, as a student myself, I wanted more resources that could help me deal with my stress. Students should be able to seek their teachers and other health professionals and their parents to figure out ways to decrease their stress and, feel normal again, even in times like these. So first, I created an easily accessible survey for students by, using Google Forms. I looked up inspiration from previous stress-related exams. I wanted to know factors such as what were they doing, how were they feeling, how were they doing to cope with stress. And the second thing I did was I sent my survey to participants mainly in the DC area. I mainly sent it to like my classmates, people I knew. I also asked some of my friends to send to their friends, connections. And third, I analyzed the data using a t-test to find the correlation between students and stress. Why did I use the t-test? So I used the t-test because I was studying between the same population group, but studying between 2 data points. I used the paired t-test because I was still analyzing between participants. I had a very specific question I will get to the next slide, and that was very useful. I do have to profess that not all the data is completed, and halfway through my experimentation period, I did have to redo the survey and add more questions that not all my participants were able to analyze or answer properly. So after doing the t-test, I found out that there was a very low percentage that the data was randomized. So I was able to conclude that I am so sorry, something happened. My apologies, something really came up. But I found out that students were having very adverse effects to stress, and it was negatively impacting their lives. So what can be done now? Adolescents are, of course, feeling more stress. So I feel like adolescents should be able to have more resources that will enable them to, relieve their stress, but you're able to have someone to talk to, such as hotlines, counseling, therapy, more services that they can feel more comfortable opening up, expressing themselves in. And with my experience, I plan to enable more transparency between students, health professionals, teachers, parents, because this is a very difficult time. Something's wrong with my technology, but thank you so much. My next steps are to finalize the data with an updated survey so all my participants can have their data points logged in. Apologies again. I wanted to expand research on anxiety, depression, external stress factors to see how they were affecting students. I also plan to conduct another experiment. I want to specialize on what specifically about school is affecting students. If there's something going on in their home life, economic status that might be affecting their stress levels. And here are like all the sources I use. They're also mentioned in my paper, but this is the specific ones I mentioned within this PowerPoint. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Iris. That was a wonderful presentation. I just have one question for you. I noticed that in your next steps, you talked about doing an experiment on what high school students would want for resources. So have you initially found some resources that that would be good for the mental health of students?
That's a great question. I have found that like a lot of students, they've been reaching out to hotlines, they've been trying to be more social. They've been trying to do like group therapy. If I can find the sources, then I'll definitely send them to you.
Perfect, thank you. And remember, guys, you guys can all attendees, please submit your Q&A in the Q&A box, and I will go ahead and ask our presenters the questions. Educators, you guys have any questions for your presenters? Okay, we got one question in. How can doctors, in your opinion, Iris, how can doctors help their school-age adolescent patients with stress?
I believe doctors should be more proactive in like academic sources. I know when I talk to my doctor, she recommend like programs I could go to, like group therapy, like more like online or like COVID-friendly options such as like online therapy, counseling, going to hotlines.
Okay, perfect. Are there any questions from Andrew or Sherry? If not, we can just go ahead and move on to the next presentation.
I have a question, Iris. You mentioned that you made some alterations or changes to your surveys. What prompted those changes and how did that impact, or how do you think it will impact your results?
So I went to my mentor, went to Dr. Schuster, apologies, and I asked him like, what else could I add to my survey that could make it better, that can make questions more cohesive. I did add those questions mainly about like how did students feel before the pandemic, like their stress levels versus now.
I also want to give some credit to Iris's mentor. We have a partnership with American University where we have members of their pre-med program come in on Mondays and provide feedback to our students on their senior projects. And they've really gone above and beyond with providing feedback and staying in touch with our students. And I know that Iris's mentor was very helpful in that process. And also, good job, Iris.
Thank you.
Yes, again, great job, Iris. We're just gonna go ahead and move on to our next presenter, Nafisa. She will be presenting on aquaponics and domestic fish. Really interesting conversation, I think. You can go ahead, Nafisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nafisa Weeks. I am currently a senior at McKinley Technology High School. I will be attending George Mason University in the fall for this semester, and I'll be studying forensic science. So my project is titled as A Tale of Two Fish. And I'm sorry if it's like a long pause. It's a delay when presenting project. Okay, so my research question is, between koi and goldfish, which species is most effective in growing plants in an aquaponics system? Effectiveness is measured through plant height. Okay, so what should we know about aquaponics? Some vital concepts that need to be acknowledged about aquaponics is that it is a way to grow fish and crops at the same time. There are no need for fertilizers and less water is used in the system. Aquaponics is a closed system, meaning that there is no need for for outside contributors once the system starts. Due to the system being closed, there's a lot of room for error. Limiting factors such as water temperature, pH level, parasites, etc., can overrun the system as a whole. So what is the role of fish? The fish in the system provide nutrients to crops through their waste, and in return, the crops help purify water these fish need to survive. Commonly used fish for this system are catfish, koi, and goldfish. So why is aquaponics important? Like, what is the real world application? Aquaponics is farmable anywhere and will be able to produce higher yields of crops. There are too many unpredictable factors in farming, traditional farming, such as weather disasters, erosion, and there's too much land that there might not be enough left to do anything with. There needs to be a way for farming to be easy, accessible, and fun for all to learn how to do. Aquaponics will be able to do this through an experiment. We'll be able to support the aquaponics, will support the end of food security, or at least hinder its insecurity, or at least hinder its progress. So how was the research question tested? The materials used were a ruler, 2 koi fish, 2 goldfish, 50 wheatgrass seeds, 5 aquaponic systems. The systems are identified as back to the rules water garden, a lux meter app, which measures the light, air in the area, a kitchen scale, and 1 pack of pH test strips. In this experiment, 2 aquaponic systems will house 2 koi fish, the other 2 house goldfish, and 1 was a negative control to observe, just for observation. The wheatgrass seeds was used as a dependent variable, and the varying fish species are utilized as the independent variable in the experiment. The lux meter app and pH test strips were used to maintain and make sure that there were no outlying data, make sure the constant stayed the same over time. Okay. And when gathering the data, I used centimeters and measured it in 3-day intervals. So how was my data analyzed? Once all the data was collected, a statistical analysis using the interquartile range method, or IQR, was to determine if any outliers were in the data sets. And if there weren't any, which there weren't, they were excluded from final data analysis. After the IQR method, the data sets were averaged to find the mean and standard deviation of plant growth over time. So my results. As you can see, based on the line graph, the negative control had the most plant growth over time, which is surprising. It had the most plant growth over time. And from the data table, you can see that the first 6 days there were no plant growth, and it had a spike in plant growth around day 9, between day 8 and 9, which is not listed in the graph. And then these numbers are just standard deviation and the mean of plant height growth. They averaged anywhere between 3 to 7 or like 11. So what do my results mean? The results show that neither the koi or goldfish were more effective in growing plants over time. The negative control, which can be equated to hydroponics, resulted in being the most effective method. Not only did the negative control have the highest height average, but also the growth rate was exponential until day 15, which it plateaued and didn't have any growth after that. It was observed that aquaponics is not only growing plants, but the fish as well. The system is meant for consumption of both parties, which can be a correlation to why the aquaponics didn't outbeat hydroponics. Okay, so what follows this experiment? Investigation behind whether the type of plant or crop affected the effectiveness of aquaponics compared to hydroponics. like we can use different seeds, maybe radishes, tomatoes, or just any other plant to test that. And also research about aquaponics and question whether it is ultimately better for at crop production than aquaponics. And these are all my sources. Not all of them are included in this presentation. This is just for my paper, but these are my sources. And thank you. And I would like to acknowledge Dr. Schuster, Ms. Richardson, and the McKinley Technology High School. Questions?
Thank you for that. That was a wonderful presentation, Nafisa. I never knew what aquaponics was until today. So it's always great to learn something new, you know what I'm saying? And so with that, I actually have one question in regards to that, actually. So what is the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics?
Okay, so the difference between hydroponics and aquaponics is that hydroponics is only growing crops, plants with only water. There's no second party. Aquaponics is growing both fish and plants and crops, which means like they're meant to eat both the crops and the fish, while hydroponics just grows crops.
Okay, I have a couple questions from our attendees. Thank you for submitting your questions. Remember to continue submitting your questions through the Q&A button. So question, what made you decide to use koi fish and goldfish instead of catfish?
So koi and goldfish were more accessible at this period of time. And plus, like as Dr. Schuster said, that our projects are done at home. So thanks to my mother, I'm using her dining room table to do this project. So I needed smaller fish for these systems. So goldfish and koi were the best option outside of catfish.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question. Our attendee wanted to first compliment you on your great presentation. And so what made you interested in this topic? Do you intend to keep doing other experiments in this area?
So what got me interested in this topic was my biotech 3 teacher, Ms. Walker. She's not here, I don't think. So we learned about aquaponics, and we also talked about more than just biotech. We talked about food insecurity and how our growing population we're running out of places to do agriculture. And I was interested in learning different ways we can provide and slow down food insecurity and like help it stop, because in the future we're going to need innovations like this.
Yes, wonderful. Like that's literally what I was thinking about throughout the whole presentation. I was like, this is such an environmentally friendly method of growing crops and growing fish, killing two birds with one stone. So with that, did the McLean Tech educators, Sherry or Andrew, do you guys have any questions for Nafisa?
Well, first I'd like to say, Nafisa, fantastic job. Aquaponics is definitely close to my heart, so I enjoyed your presentation thoroughly. I'd like to ask you, just based on your experience and working on this project, what recommendation would you give to someone who was maybe just getting started with aquaponics? Maybe which sort of fish they try, which sort of plants would they start out with? What do you think?
I would first suggest to try to get a completed system, like a home project type system first, which it has all the instructions and has all the materials that you will need for the aquaponics system. But if you cannot do that, you should do like home research, a quick search about what fish is best, like what is needed, because a lot of the sources are explicit in explaining what aquaponics is and what it needs, like in just one page website setting.
Andrew, do you have any questions?
I was just curious, what is the pH that you typically keep the water at for aquaponic systems? Is it a neutral 7, or should it be more acidic or basic than that?
I kept it at a neutral 7, but the pH for the waters that it should be is all based on what type of fish you have. So goldfish and koi were freshwater fish, so they typically needed a 7 pH level, but sometimes it varies. When I did my research about catfish, they needed like maybe a 6 or something. And so it just based off the fish type that you use for the system.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that catfish would prefer more acidic water. That's cool. I think we have one more question in the Q&A.
Question from the Q&A. So you mentioned your setup was at home. Did it take up more space than you anticipated, or do you see a real life application in a home setting?
So in a home setting, it is actually applicable. Like you can do it at home. Just for my experiment, I had 5 tanks. So in that consideration, 5 tanks is a lot of space. Most aquaponic systems have different compartments. We could grow different crops all at once, which means that you won't need to take up a lot of space. My project took up a lot of space just because I had 5 tanks and a lot of fish. So.
Thank you for all that. Thank you for answering all those questions really eloquently and thoughtful. And so we're going to go ahead and go to our last presenter. It'll be Brandt. He'll be discussing I believe is the efficacy of mask wearing. I'm going to go ahead and share his presentation with you guys all.
The name New Netherlands, but then became the English colony in 1664. This colony also included the first permanent settlement in New Jersey. Delaware, as part of the Swedish colony in New Sweden, was founded in 1638.
So good afternoon to everybody in the meeting currently.
Excuse me, Brandt. Can someone else in the panelists, can you please mute yourself? There's background audio in the back. Thank you. Go ahead, Brandt.
So yeah, so my name is Fogwe Zama Anya Brent. I only put 2 of my names on there, but you can just call me Brent. I'm a student at McKinley Tech. I'm currently taking Biotech 4, and I plan on going to college to study pre-medicine. So my presentation is going to be about
Brandt, sorry to interrupt, Brandt. Before you continue, I think you have you might have something playing on your laptop. It sounds like it's like a history lesson or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's my little brother.
I'm not sure if you can politely ask him to turn it down. Just another example of the constraints of COVID on our students having to share space and whatnot.
All right, is that better?
Yes. Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Sorry about that. My little brother's in class and he's in the same room as me.
Well, I'm glad he's listening to class and everything. That's good.
So my presentation is about which mask is best for you during the pandemic. Yeah, so my research question is basically around the same thing. So which type of mask filters droplets the best? So so the way masks work, they work by filtering out droplets. We wanted to take a look at surgical masks, N95 masks, and cloth masks. Surgical masks are usually made of melted polymer placed between 2 pieces of non-woven fabric. Like surgical masks, N95 masks are, oh my bad, that's a typo, are made of non-woven fabric. These are often made of polypropylene. Most of the other masks are tested and they use some sort of polyester, cotton, or silk blend. Please excuse, I have a lot of typos in that last slide, but so how do they prevent COVID transmission? Masks work by filtering out the infected droplets that are emitted when we speak, when we cough, or when we sneeze. Essentially, the more that people wear masks, the less likely it is for the virus to spread from person to person. So basically, we have a graphic on the right showing how COVID-19 could spread from a carrier to a healthy person, just showing that if both people wear masks, there's a very low risk. If just one person is wearing a mask, there's a very medium amount of risk, but there's still a risk, and it's a very high risk situation if nobody is wearing a mask. So why is this important? So masks were needed are still needed during the pandemic. This is because they are the biggest tool that we have in preventing the spread, as shown in the last slide. Although my research question has already been answered by past experiments, my goal is to confirm these results following my own research. So how did I test my research question? So my research question was tested by counting the droplets emitted when someone speaks without a mask versus with a mask. So essentially a box was created with a camera at one end and a hole for the participant's mouth at the other. Secondly, a laser was put into the box, and the laser was essentially using a cylindrical lens. The participants were asked to say, "I love McKinley Tech" over 10 times, over and over again, not 10 times, for 10 seconds over and over again. Then the droplets are seen and revealed on the laser sheet. And then pictures were taken by the camera and the droplets were then counted. On the right, you see a picture of what the cylindrical lens basically does to the laser and how it spreads it in the box. And then that's a picture on the top of basically the box that we use to count the droplets. So how did I analyze my data? So after the pictures were taken, they were sorted into either the mask subgroups or the control. Then the droplets were counted for each subgroup. After all the data was compiled and sorted, we compared the data sets to each other to create basically a conclusion. So results. So at the present moment, the results of this aren't available. This is because we recently just had to switch to a different camera. We planned to use a cell phone camera last week because of the instructions laid out in the experiment we were basically trying to emulate, but that did not work at all. It was not a pretty sight, but Dr. Schuster suggested that we use his DSLR camera in order to get better footage. But we haven't, well, we plan on, in the future, like tomorrow, um, redoing the experiment to, gather as much data as possible. So future directions, I plan on exploring what type of masks are used during the pandemic, and by what groups are more likely to use what mask. So what group is more likely to use a cloth mask? What group is more likely to use surgical masks? That is outside of, like hospitals, because a doctor is more likely to use like an N95 or something of that nature. Or I could research how KN95 masks compared to N95 masks. And these are basically just the sources that I use to create this slide. I have more sources on the actual research paper I created, but these are just the ones I used information for this slide. And thank you so much for listening. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Brent, for that. I have a quick question for you, because part of being a scientist is having a hypothesis, right? So, what's your hypothesis for your? Because you haven't seen the results yet, so I wonder what you think your results will be.
So basically, going into this, I expected that the surgical mask would do the best, or the N95 mask would do the best out of all of them. I don't really expect much from the cloth masks. They're not really, usually they're not professionally made. So I don't really expect them to filter as many droplets as, let's say, a professional N95 mask would.
Perfect. We have one question in Q&A. So again, they wanted to give you a compliment for your great presentation. Do you find that students in high school prefer one type of mask over the others, especially when they are in person or in person and in school?
Yeah, I would say students, from what I've seen, are more likely to use basically whatever is more stylish. They don't. It's rare that, you know, somebody would pick a mask based off of functionality or, you know, research. They people in general just basically pick whatever mask they think, you know, looks the best.
Thank you for that. Another question. What was your experience like using a laser to measure results?
I would say, so basically, to I don't completely understand the question.
So the question is, what was your experience like using the laser to measure your results? I'm supposing using your camera to measure results.
Oh, okay. So with the phone we used, it didn't really work because the droplets weren't really showing up on the camera. So we took the pictures, but they weren't really showing up on the sheet. So basically, when you talk, the amount of droplets that were supposed to be on the sheet weren't clear or showing up on the picture. So we took a lot of pictures of them over and over again to, you know, basically make sure that, you know, we weren't doing something wrong. But yeah, we found out that it was most likely the phone that was messing up.
Thank you for
Brant,
that.
I was saying, Brant, maybe you could tell them about like what you were doing with the box and like what I was doing on the other end and everything.
Oh yeah. So basically, so Dr. Schuster was the one with the phone. I basically I had to speak on the other end. Yeah. So I had to speak on the other end, and, you know, we had to say the phrase "I love McKinley Tech" over and over again. And then he took the pictures, and we basically, you know, looked over the pictures.
I want to give Brant some credit because he also had to, in that image, you may have seen there was a jacket on there. That's not just someone putting their jacket on the box and forgetting about it. That was kind of like those old timey photography things where you have to put it over yourself to have some darkness. So the room we were in was really warm already. And then Brant had to have that jacket over him. And I was like, nope, you're not done yet. Got to keep saying, I love McKinley Tech. So thank you, Brant, for being uncomfortable for that, like almost an hour of us testing that. And hopefully it will be a nice day out tomorrow. So yeah, hopefully.
I have one more question from attendees. So yes, they wanted to say thank you for your wonderful presentation. Again, a compliment. I know you suspect the surgical or N95 will be the best options. But if you do not have access to these, do you anticipate that doubling up on cloth masks will provide a greater level of protection?
Actually, yeah, that is actually exactly true. So part of my research was to find out what, you know, outside of just the masks that we use, what else can you add on to make sure your mask is as safe as possible. So I came across an article that says, yeah, you can doubling up basically any cotton fabric would make it, you know, basically more effective, and it's still just as breathable as, you know, using just basically one cloth fabric. So yeah, it does work. It's actually a lot more effective. I think it was up to like 15% or something like that, more effective.
Thank you for that. Sherry, do you have any questions for Brant?
Yes, first of all, Brant, excellent job. Your research is obviously relevant to our current environmental climate. My question is in reference to your data collection. So I had the opportunity to see Dr. Schuster interact with your laser box yesterday, and he was able to capture a picture, and I saw a lot of droplets sort of come out, right? So you talked about counting those droplets. What strategy or methodology are you using to accurately count the number of droplets that you're able to capture in an image?
Yeah, so so in the study, we're basically trying to emulate the the scientist, basically, he used a software to count the droplets, but we don't have access to the software. So we're basically just gonna visually count as many droplets as we see. Just basically zoom in, see as many droplets, count as many droplets as we can visually see.
Awesome. And one last question. How do you expect your results of this project could be used to impact your peers' perspective of which sort of mask is better to wear?
I think this could be used as, a way to convince people that the mask they're using maybe is not as effective as they actually think it is, and maybe they can, do more to, make sure they're keeping themselves safe and keeping the people around them safe. So, yeah, just basically just encourage people to do more, basically on their side.
Thank you, Brent, for answering all those questions. That was a wonderful presentation, a very timely research topic. I just want to thank everyone for all our attendees for your questions. It made our presentations even more engaging, and I also got to learn a little bit more from some of the answers from our presenters. I'm going to throw it over to Andrew and Sherry to present a couple final few words before I give some closing remarks.
Sure. And once again, I'd like to thank AAMC for your incredible partnership. I hope you got to see today just the impact and the influence that your time has on our scholars and their confidence and ability to conduct a research project really flawlessly and then be able to share that information with you. And more specifically, I'd like to thank Deo, Clarence, Tony, Gallo, Antonio Bush, Lisa Carlin, and I'm forgetting Carrie Sutton. You guys took time out of your day to come in and speak with our scholars in separate classes, and that influence and that time has really allowed us to help move our students forward and keep them motivated during a pandemic. And so we hope that you guys will be able to join us for our Senior Project STEM Fair, where you'll get to see an even more in-depth version of what our students are studying and ask them even more questions. So thank you all very, very much for your time and partnership. And we hope to continue this. I'll pass it over to Dr. Schuster.
All right, thank you so much. Well, first, thank you to our three scholars who went above and beyond to create some presentations a few days before the deadline for their projects. All of you guys, I know you stayed like basically an hour after class working on this with me yesterday. By the time I got out of the in-person teaching room, everyone in the school was gone. So we definitely stayed behind, and then you guys worked on it in the evening. So thank you so much for all that. Also, thank you to AAMC for your partnership with us. I know that the workshops that you guys provided were really impactful, not just for our seniors, but our Biotech 1 students. So really looking forward to our continuing partnership. And again, just plugging our STEM fair, please come by, and if you can, volunteer as a judge, because we'd love to have you see more than just these projects, but all of the biotech projects that will be happening.
Yes, thank you, Andrew and Sherry, for those really, really warm closing remarks. And also just to piggyback on the virtual STEM fair, it was really, really great experience. I went to it last year. It was actually really a great credit to McLean Tech, because it was maybe 2 months after the lockdowns. So it was really, really great work by them to shift the whole in-person STEM fair into a virtual STEM fair, and it was really, really great, and it worked seamlessly. And I have all the emails of everyone who was an attendee here. So I will definitely send you guys the information for the STEM fair, so you guys can all participate as judges. So you can see some of the scholars outside of Nafisa, Reyes and Brandt, who are also great individuals and smart and great bright futures. And I just want to close real quick with a comment that was made. I just have to say, because this is wonderful. I think it was a great closing comment. So it's for one of our colleagues. He said, great presentations, Iris, Nafisa, and Brandt. Your topics are interesting and important. I'm impressed with the rigor you brought to your research, your understanding of why these research areas matter, the insights you had into the future areas for research, and your resilience when dealing with your research constraints. Your work increases my faith in the future. Best of luck to you all. wonderful way. Very, very warm remarks. So again, thank you guys, all three presenters. If you guys have anything you guys want to say, then I'll go at once.
I was saying thank you for the comment. It made me smile.
Yeah, same thing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting us do this and present. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the comment and giving us the opportunity to present to you all.
All right, with all that, thank you everyone for attending, and you guys have a great rest of your day, and try to stay warm. I know it's a little cold this week. Goodbye, everyone.